Welcome back to a look at the classes we used in the Beyond Legend campaign. So this is going to be a little bit of the class review that I usually do at the end of campaigns, but I want to throw some tidbits out there at the start. Because I'm not just basing it on this campaign. So I'm trying to do an overview of the viability of the classes in the Beyond Legend mod pack in general. And to give you some context there, I've now played or am playing 4 campaigns of Beyond Legend. So we started one campaign on the stream, then halfway through that first campaign, I started this YouTube campaign. That first stream campaign wiped out and ended at the Cygate. We did a new start that lasted about, I'm not even sure if we made it through the first in-game month, and now the 4th campaign is the current Twitch campaign, which defeated the Cygate on the last stream and is gonna do probably the final 2 missions in the next stream. Fingers crossed, which, you know, if things go right, that might actually be a win on my belt. So, 3 campaigns that actually went a little bit longer, so there were some balance changes here and there during the campaigns, and I'll try to keep that in mind. I might even, after we go through most of the classes here in this campaign, load up the save from the Twitch campaign and talk a little bit about the classes that we additionally used there that didn't make the cut here or never got offered, etc, etc. So we'll see how the time looks for the episode. Now there is a few things worth noting, and I think a lot of or some of your class choices might change depending on which pick your poison choices you get offered and which you go for. Most importantly, and you know, if you want to play a drinking game, take a sip each time I reference network repairs. Network repairs is probably the pick your poison choice that's going to have the biggest impact on the viability of some classes. As a reminder, network repairs is something that most advent units will get a reaction fire attack as a return fire whenever you attack them. And even things like marking target counts as an attack in that regard. It even triggers on something like a Skulljack attack, which outright kills the enemy, but they still get their return fire shot off. But yeah, we'll get to that when certain classes get discussed here. So I was very much been deliberating here for an hour almost how I want to present this. I was thinking about, you know, putting squads together in the squad loadout screen with all the snipers and all the officers, but it was just too much. So we're just gonna go through the classes one by one, start at the top, and then just go with the bards here. So, Hitman. I think just good all-around class, great as an officer, great as a scout. I think Assassin is probably one of the most reliable ways to regain concealment. We were a little bit struggling when we had that dark event that disabled all concealment, but other than that, if you can avoid that, you're just going to be in a great boat. They also contribute, of course, with Fanfire is always going to be a really strong damage dealing ability, and they contribute to that. What I would probably change is going for Reconnoiter over Disabling Shot. Disabling Shot is really good utility, but I think having a free battle scanner every couple turns is just really good, and it is exceptionally good if you have any sort of stealthy enemies, so Seekers or Hinter variants, and then also, of course, against the Assassin. And it's a very early thing that you can get here. Yeah, not much else to say. So let's just go on here. Alright, the Combat Medic. First class that has this incredibly power curve and then suddenly disappears during the campaign. And I think that was one of the classes that suffered the most from the before mentioned network repairs. So basically, when your whole class idea is that you RAF in against enemies, and RAF is not a super high damage attack, so you're very unlikely to kill the enemy with the RAF attack, but that's fine, because then you follow up RAF with a shotgun shot and another shotgun shot and another shotgun shot, and maybe getting some free ripjack attacks in with malpractice. You can dish out a lot of damage, and you know, in normal circumstances, on a full turn when everything is off cooldown, a combat medic can probably take down 2, maybe even 3 enemies. But if all of these enemies shoot back at you because of network repairs, suddenly you're spending more time in sickbay than you're spending on missions. And that's kind of the reason why our combat medic kind of stopped getting put out on missions. There's also, of course, the fact that this is definitely more a guerrilla operations class, and brings kind of limited potential to untimed missions, story missions, supply raids, HQs, that kind of stuff. But in a world without network repairs, I still think they would be definitely useful all the way to the end. Let's see. I mean, you could you have a shadow step here to avoid reaction fire, but you can't give up grapple expert. Grapple expert is basically too reliant, too much needed for the class to work. I also think one thing I just want to point out here, that I probably always build my combat medics this kind of way. I think the only exception is sometimes when I have like hit and run on the XCOM row, I would go for disabling slash over close encounters. I tried this top row build once, it really didn't work out for me at all. So yeah. But it's a fun class to play. It's definitely one of my favorite classes. It made me sad that it kind of became so, I don't want to say irrelevant, but such a liability with network repairs. Oh boy. The Arsonist. Alright, before we talk about the Arsonist specifically, let's talk about fire and any classes that use fire. In base Long War of the Chosen and base Tetjam, of course, fire is a really strong tool, as it disables most enemies and most of their abilities. Now, in the Beyond Legend set, you already have some additional fire immunities. All priests get fire immunities from the get-go, or medics get it. Then there's a dark event where snakes can get, well, not fire immunity, but if they're burning, they're not disabled and their accuracy is increased, or their damage, or something like that. Heart of Ice is the dark event or chosen activity, or whatever it's called, that will do that. Which is also then, of course, counterintuitive to fire being the counter to Requiem snakes, so that they don't get their reaction, but you don't really want to set them on fire. That means their accuracy is improved. It's a whole thing. So fire by itself is already a fair bit weaker. Now, in addition to that, for reasons that I'm just not aware of, let's just put it this way, there were also additional nerfs to the Arsonist class in itself. The most important one being that the signature ability, the Camphor Suppression, which in base Tetjam will always guaranteed set enemies on fire that are in your suppression area, no longer does that. And we're not stopping here. Even enemies that are hit by your regular attack are no longer guaranteed to burn. So you have a regular attack with the camp thrower, which has a to-hit roll, right, based on your aim stat, which is not necessarily something you prioritize on your guy anyway. And if you miss that, that's normal, you know, then they're not set on fire, that's fine. But even if you hit, then there's still an additional roll whether or not you set these enemies on fire. This is all not the case in base Tat Jam. Anything you hit will be set on fire. Anything you suppress will be set on fire. So that's already then a super huge nerf on the base suppression and on the base immolator, which is already kind of a limited weapon because of the limited range and the cone, etc, etc. Well, you still have your canisters, right? You know, blue screen canister, really good. Stuns a lot of enemies, well, yeah, but if a lot of enemies now have stun immunity, then that thing also loses lots of its appeal. I tried to make them work, you know, I just... The thing I usually want to do is not just like look at on the paper and say, okay, this doesn't work anymore, but actually I want to try things out and see, is it really as bad as I thought it is? Or am I just exaggerating? Like my initial response when the camp thrower, the suppression, no longer setting enemies on fire, when that nerf was announced, my initial response was, yeah, the class is dead. There's no point ever building an Arsonist. But I wanted to actually test it out to see if my initial reaction was over the top. And my conclusion is, no, class is dead. That's like... building an Arsonist is just shooting yourself in the foot. And it's very sad, because I think it's not as overpowered as... I don't think the nerfs were justified, let's put it that way. Moving on. So, Reaper. We never got to play around with the respect Reaper after the initial go. Reaper is kind of a mixed bag, so I think the Shadow Grenadier build, first of all, is a lot of fun, and second of all, it was really effective. Interestingly enough, I think I had a Shadow Grenadier Reaper in both campaigns, so in both this campaign and in the current ongoing Twitch campaign. Both campaigns started with a Reaper start, went for Shadow Grenadier, and it turned out really effective. Up to a certain point. So there's basically two things happening, you know, roughly at the mid-game, early late game stage. First of all, because they're so effective, they're one of your first people to hit Master Sergeant, and what I often tend to do with the first couple Master Sergeant is kinda, they do then covert actions, maybe they go into important havens so they have good faceless detection, or they just don't go on missions so they don't take away experience from other people. Sure, I bring them out on missions when I need like a super strong soldier to pull the rest of the squad through, but I kind of tend to bring them on fewer missions just so that I'm not wasting XP on somebody who doesn't need it anymore. And so they saw less actions on that point. And once I needed those Master Sergeants again, the whole grenade spec lost a lot of its power. Like early game, the making everybody bleed from your grenades for 2 points of bleed damage is really strong, right? That's a guaranteed kill on so many enemies in the early game. But then, as the game goes on, and also as more robotic enemies that obviously can't bleed are on the field, it just got weaker and weaker, so to the point where I think late game the Shadow Grenadier lost a lot of its appeal. Didn't get to test out the Death Dealer build, haven't really played a Banish build in Beyond Legend, so not much I can say about that. I think Banish is probably still going to be the top utility. You have so many high health enemies that need some banishing. I think a Banish build could be really strong, obviously against the Chosen, but against things like a Mechapede, Colossus, all these kind of high health late game enemies, not so much against the Sectoid. In addition to that, Bullseye has become such a important skill to have on your squad. Playing this whole debuffing game of making enemies not be able to hit you back by reducing their aim. And Bullseye is such an important card by that, so any class that brings Bullseye to the table has a lot going for it. So I think a non-Shadow Grenadier build can really stay relevant all through the game. Agent. So, interesting enough, we also have a knifey, scouty agent in the Twitch campaign, and they're also an officer on top of just being a reliable scout for the team. I think not being an officer in this campaign was the right choice, just because we have that insane offensive potential with Shank Redemption, where you come in from stealth with a run and slice, you get a free stab with Lightning Fang, you get another free stab with Shank Redemption, and then you still have like 2 actions remaining, and this reset your cooldown on run and slice, so you could run to another enemy and then stab them twice. It was surprisingly good damage, surprisingly effective. Yeah, reconciling with Shadow Melt didn't always quite work out. Unfortunately, that whole thing got a bit of a damper with, drumroll, network repairs. I think in a world without network repairs, this would have been even more insane, but yeah, she ended up being in sickbay way too often. Now, the downside a little bit of a agent scout is that we don't have anything to reduce our detection range outside of bringing an SMG to the fight. So no covert, no Ghostwalker, no Shadowborn. And with the nerf to the Advent armors that happened halfway through this campaign, unless you have a Pathfinder Hunter armor, which is the one Advent armor where the detection range was not nerfed for, I don't know if it was deliberate or just overlooked. It's going to make the scouting a little bit, well, actually much harder if you don't have any detection reduction. Like, detection ranges are a little bit out of whack on some enemies, so you kind of really need that. And also with the nerf to detection range reductions in general, where so Lightfoot used to be 25% reduction in detection range, and it was changed to mobility and defense, means you don't even as an agent have access to anything that reduces your detection range, that is. So yeah, so another thing where I think like the Beyond Legend changes are a little bit, I don't know, poorly thought out. I think there would have been better ways to address. So the problem that was were trying to be addressed was stacking detection range reductions, right? If people had then a class that had Conceal and let's say Ghostwalker, and then they were wearing an Advent armor, you would easily get to like single tile detection ranges. And not on a Reaper in Shadow, but on a regular trooper walking around in concealment, and that was a little bit too much. But then, so the detection range reduction was removed from light-footed to avoid the stacking, and it was removed from the Advent armors to avoid the stacking. I think a better approach would have been to just, if you give all the Advent armors the covert perk, then it doesn't stack with covert anymore because it's the same perk, Stacking situation resolved without nerfing it for the classes that don't have access to all the different stacking skills. And something different could have been done with Lightfoot, I think. We'll get back to that in a bit. Also, I'm kind of now coming into the what is bad about Beyond Legend territory, not so much on a class review. So let's move on with the classes. coming to our first sniper class here with our scout. So this was kind of interesting because, you know, start of the game, you know, solid sniping, etc. Then we hit that mid-game stage where the first Requiem weapons came online, and the Requiem sniper was the big hoot, and everybody who couldn't use it was kind of left out in the cold. And then in the late game, that Requiem sniper rifle drops off fairly significantly. You know, it's still a nice AoE, but it's not that kind of damage, and you suddenly want your sniper once again for some utility. Once again, we're looking at Bullseye, and then this started to shine again. The scout came in through the good old Bullseye with scramble rounds combo to remove 40 aim from enemies. It's just really good. The main problem that a sniper scout has then is a little bit the ammo situation, you know, where you're kind of limited by your autoloader charges. But most of the time that didn't cause any issues in those missions. Like this, to me, this is kind of the almost perfect sniper build, right? You have Bullseye to debuff enemies, you have disabling shot for those enemies that can still be stunned, you have double tap for some good solid damage in your damage dealing turns. You basically get the hunker down aim perk, so as long as you kill something you have the aim boost, similar to a Death from Above sniper who steadies their weapon. Yeah, aim is not quite as good as an elite stock, but it's still good enough. And then you have some other perks that increase your aim or just increase your raw damage. Like, to me, Scout Sniper is just really good. That being said, though, if you have more scouts, now they are also similar to the Hitman, a really good scouting class that also get silent shot, similar to Assassin, reconcealment on kill thing, and they can actually do some fairly significant cleanup with Liquidator and pistol skills to just kill a bunch of stuff and at the end of the day still be concealed or reconceal with silent shot. So I really like the scout class. They have a lot of things going for them, and I guess you know, making it all depend on what your roster needs and what your XCOM row has to offer. Very well run class. I like them a lot. Oh boy, the witch. It kind of ended up being somebody who casts Amplify on some enemies and maybe saves the day a little bit by summoning a bunch of Introspectors, but I don't think that was, for me, that wasn't enough to make the class really shine. I don't think we ever got to try out Ionic Storm. I don't think we saw a mission once they hit Master Sergeant. Somebody, I don't remember if it was in a comment or somewhere else, said they kind of really need... So starting off basically with Arcwave from the get-go is really strong, and that's nicely balanced out by not having momentum, not being able to move to safety. But I feel like they should get momentum somewhere around here. Maybe that can be just packed in here with Neverworld Bridge, that hey, now you get momentum. This is where a normal Templar would gain Arcwave, and you know, let's keep them in parity. Okay, you had the AoE sooner, now you get the survival with momentum, because that just made it always, like every single time you were attacking with the character, it just became a puzzle on, okay, but how do I keep them alive after the attack? So I think, and that kind of puzzle can be fun in some campaigns, but I don't think it fits particularly well in the Beyond Legend setting. The Roboticist. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite hacker classes. We did, of course, luck out a little bit on getting Phantom in the XCOM role, so doubling up as a scout in some situations. But really the ability to stack additional hacking skill with disassembly and then having both haywire and full override, so you have multiple abilities that can hack enemies, seems just really strong. I'm not a big fan of the deployables, deployable drone, deployable resistance mech. I think they are much weaker than just being able to pick up a hacked enemy and then using your buff abilities on them. And of course they especially shine when teamed up with a spark. I'm still not 100% sure if we ever got really great benefit from mechanical supremacy. I often feel like, yeah, I know, I used it, buffed the spark, and then nothing happened for 2 turns. Or they weren't shot at anymore because of their high dodge or additional defense. I don't know, but maybe that is good enough to make it a good ability, you know? If you keep your spark alive and not being shot at, even better. This is I guess with the low mobility, going for shotgun finesse seems like a good choice here, but I can also see that just, you know, leaning in on the SMG and just going for airdrop here and staying warm with the just pure, like a specialist, you know? SMG, you never fire your own weapon and you just use your hack abilities to boost your team, provide airdrops. This was a really nice XCOM role with the additional gremlin abilities. And what they have going for them over a hijacker is really the fact that we can pick up supercharge and then have 2 charges of full override while still having failsafe, being protected from negative hack effects. And if you then have something like this kind of XCOM role where you get additional gremlin skills, getting additional charge on each of those, and on supremacy and hotwire, it's just a really fun approach. Yeah, like it kind of works well together with like, even if you don't pick up Phantom, you might want to have a scout in your team that can't hack something, you know. Teaming up with a Hitman or with another class that with a Scout Shinobi, for example, that don't necessarily ranged hack, then you have your ranged hacker here who doesn't have stealth but who can support the squad in other ways. And I think especially in Beyond Legend, with the incredible strength that hunter drones have, like whenever we had a mission where we hacked or full override hacked a hunter drone, that basically turned the game around. They're so hard to kill, and they're obviously even harder to kill for the enemies. Moving on. Combat Engineer. So we have 2 combat engineers in this campaign. One where we try to go shotgun, close range class, and then we have the whole support Grenadier build with the smoke grenades. I think I keep trying this. You know, there's the wonderful Slamfire, one of the few abilities where you can technically take unlimited shots in a turn. Well, limited by ammo, but as long as you keep critting, you can take more shots. And this is, you know, luring me in, beckoning me. But you never get there because the class is just so weak until you get to that point. It's like a, you know, the Walmart version of an assault. And kind of not good enough in that regard. And of course, then we were double hit by, yeah, say it with me, network repairs. Once again, anyone who rushes in and shotguns an enemy to the face, better make sure that enemy doesn't shoot back at you with network repairs, because if they do, we don't have any defensive measures against that. I think they kind of need I feel like they need some sort of action economy perk. Like a close encounters, hidden runs, something like that. Instead of Rupture, maybe. Rupture on a shotgun class always been kinda... eh. I don't know, that's something like I really like the offensive Grenadier, combat engineer, that can deal out a lot of damage. Needs a little bit support from the XCOM row, but you get that often enough. The support combat Grenadier with the dense smoke, we've seen how effective that is, even though honestly I hate how it makes the battlefield look, and everything is just smoke, and you're just seeing smoke clouds all day long, and even in the like cinematic animations that the game plays, and everything is just smoke, smoke, smoke. I still hope somebody makes an invisible smoke mod, but it's from the pure effectiveness, giving everybody 20, 30 aim and additional critical chance. It's just really good, and it plays in that whole meta game of making yourself unhittable by either debuffing the enemies or buffing your defense. So yeah, Combat Engineer has the easiest access to that, ends up with a ton of extra smoke grenades, instant deploy with fastball. Just a really, really solid class for that approach. Of course, not this build. This kind of didn't work out. Alright. Here we have a wonderful victim of the detection range nerfs, because the Recon can't do their job of reconning if they don't have detection reduction, and their only access to detection reduction before the nerf was, of course, Lightfoot, which used to be, I think 25% detection reduction. Detection range reduction. With the nerf, it's not there anymore. Just mobility and defense that you don't need. So, yeah. That being said, this I still think they can be really, really strong. Getting a holo targeting on all the enemies, that especially once they reach Tech Sergeant and have vital point targeting, and you hit every single enemy for +2 damage, plus additional crit chance, plus additional hit chance, is just really good. Combine that with officer skills that you can use from concealment, and then scouting report is a really, really strong capstone. Works all really well. But this is really breaking their back at the moment. So I don't know if I would build them as a pure scout anymore. At least not in the Beyond Legend and the current Beyond Legend environment, because again, Lightfoot is just not doing anything. Like really, it's not doing anything for the class, and it's this kind of indirect class nerf. Yeah, move along. All right, Gunner, absolute powerhouse, amazing. Always makes me happy. One of the base long war classes is still viable, is still good. Mostly, a little bit, I want to say, carried by having baseline Shredder. There's so much armor floating around in late game Beyond Legend that any class that has Shredder on their main tree or has a high chance of getting Shredder in the XCOM row, it's just gonna work. Fun fact, in the very first Beyond Legend campaign on Twitch, we actually built a knife gunner. Didn't quite have that kind of impact that Flounder had here in this campaign. I've also heard of people having really good success with suppression builds. Yeah, it's gonna be a very cold day in hell when I ever build a full suppression gunner. And just, we even had improved suppression here. Our suppression would disorient the primary target. Did we use it? Absolutely not. I don't think I've... Did we ever suppress something? when we could just take 2 shots at it and shred it and holo target it for the rest of squad. Very ready. Talking about having Shredder, I mean, again, one of the base Long War classes, the Ranger, has some solid DPS, and I think we got incredibly lucky with getting Shredder in the XCOM role, making Paula here one of the strongest characters basically in the barracks. That was just, you know, a force to reckon with each time she was on the mission. Really strong, good survivability, and just good damage. Now, of course, if you don't get the kills, once again, you suffer a little bit from the good old network repairs shenanigans. But unlike other classes that are kind of exposing themselves, attacking these enemies, Rangers and Gunners usually are sitting somewhere in full cover, shooting the enemy. And if they don't kill and the enemy shoots back with a reaction attack, there's a very low chance to actually get hit. But the liability is still there. So if you can pick up something like a dedication, well, you know, you shouldn't be picking network repairs. Just don't ever do that. Pick your poison chance again. The Hoplite. Well, I sound like a broken record, but once again, you know, their whole playing style of running in with shield charge, bashing enemy, and then you get automatically triggers shield wall, which then triggers protect and serve, so you get a non-movement action, basically aka an attack action. You shoot enemies that are then in close range with your pistol expertise. No, what is it? No, I think it is pistol. Well, whatever, you know, your auto pistol that has then close encounters, and then, you know, liquidator, you just free action kills, and then a lot of, you know, lightning hands, slamfire doing a lot of damage, and thanks to Dervish you do that whole thing soon again. Incredibly strong. Unless, of course, that enemy you just shield charge will shoot back at you and injure you because of network repairs, and that guy you lightning handsed or you close encounters shot without killing them will also shoot back at you. And suddenly, the tanky shield class is just taking too many hits and is gonna be injured all the time. In a world without network repairs, this is just incredibly good skill set. Again, perfect shot having a flush effect also, which counters chosen and requiem reactions. And I actually really enjoyed Gunslinger. You know, I hate to say it, I think this is a perk I ignored for way too long, and I always thought, yeah, I mean, how likely is it gonna be that you're in a position exactly where the enemies will then get those reaction shots? No, yeah, more likely than you think. To be fair, there were a few missions where I picked, you know, clicked on the gunslinger and said, hopefully the reinforcements drop nearby, and they dropped exactly on top of me, and then you just murdered them all. There might have been a little bit of luck involved with that, but I still think gunslinger is surprisingly good. So yeah, overall I think solid skill set, a little bit tanky, very good like cleanup potential with liquidator, good utility with perfect shot, because having more flush effects is just a good thing to have in your squad. But yeah, in a world with network repairs, it's struggling a bit. But you know, thankfully most of the time you're not gonna live in a world with network repairs. The second, I refuse to believe that fire has been that nerfed, and no, it's still suffering a bit. Although, you know, it was not as bad as the Arsonist situation, but also the fact that he didn't make it to Master Sergeant is kind of a big sign of this is not as good as it used to be. Like, I think in most other campaigns, my Flamer Technicals are amongst the first people to reach Master Sergeant because they're just so good on so many missions, but it's not cutting it anymore. And I think a lot of it comes down to the additional enemies that are fire immune. Like, it's not just that there are a couple more enemies that are fire immune, it's more like the type of enemies, like priests and medic being fire immune, and then the medic, of course, you know, if you don't control the medic, then he's just gonna heal the others and cleanse the fire from them. So that's kind of a big concern. I still think it can work, but yeah. The other factor, of course, then the previously mentioned Hearts of Ice, where even the snakes that you can usually, it's one of the major burn targets. If you no longer can burn snakes, then there's not much left. Anyway, moving on. A hunter. Yet another sniper. So the usually hunter used to be the class where you went for the auto sniper, the single shot sniper rifle build, with running on empty. So each turn you would move, get a free reload on your auto sniper, and then take a shot for, I don't know, enough damage to kill an enemy 2 times over. The auto sniper rifles are nerfed into uselessness in the Beyond Legend environment. So I still try to build a hunter and say, we just don't go for this. We just go for a standard sniper build. And despite having that bullseye utility, it just didn't quite hit the spot that you get, like the kind of reliability that, for example, a scout sniper has. No disabling shot. Nothing that boosts accuracy outside of Shadowborn, but that's not always possible to get. To get to activate. I don't want to say that's bad, but I think if you have the liberty to just choose which sniper class you want to have, then a scout is probably gonna outperform a hunter most of the time. I kind of miss the running on empty build. I'm looking forward to the next non-Beyond Legend campaign that we're gonna do on stream. Although, no, I also won't be doing any sniping there. Talking of snipers, the Bounty Hunter. Yeah, I think Hit and Run made this already strong class even strong, right? Just getting that multi-shot, I think. So our Bounty Hunter in the stream campaign doesn't have Hit and Run, and it feels okay. You know, you have your really strong terms with Overwhelming Burst, but when that is on cooldown, you just have a single shot that may or may not hit good. But with Hit and Run, being able to engage 2 targets every turn, or shoot 1 target twice, you can get that damage output that you kind of need from a good sniper. That being said, you're missing all the usual sniper utility in terms of bullseye, disabling shot, lead the target, all that kind of stuff. It's just pure damage, and for some missions, pure damage is not good enough. You need like some utility, some squad related abilities, since you are limited on slots, right? If you have unlimited soldiers you can bring on a mission, or have like these super large missions like an Avenger defense, you have plenty of slots available where you can bring a pure damage class. But in the smaller engagements, you kind of want some utility slots that need to be filled. That being said, I was very surprised at the sheer damage output that something like a Terminate plus Overwhelming Burst with blue screen rounds could provide on a sector pod. There was that one supply raid on that flooded map where, we spent the first time just doing a little bit of damage and shredding the sector pod, and then the second turn was just, Terminate, Overwhelming Burst, and it was gone. And I was just sitting there, it's like, oh yeah, that's that much damage. Alright, Shinobis. I think we had 2 Shinobis, none of them reached Master Sergeant, but they came really late to the party, mostly as a last-ditch effort to hopefully, solve my problem of not having enough concealment scouts. And Apex, I tried to build more into the sortie stuff, and which ended up being like not that great. Mostly also because we also did do officer training and were mostly doing scouting stuff, and then were of course hit by the Lightfoot nerf. So it was kind of poor scouting with not quite enough damage to make slicing viable, but it was okay. It was okay. And then we had Jet. I'm not sure if I start clicking here that we get to Jet here, where we went just the pure covert shadow step kind of scouting approach, and that worked a little bit better. Like, he was fulfilling that scouting role really, really well, but of course not doing any damage in return. From pure scouting point of view, though, I think Shinobis are probably also yet another very, very reliable scout. Since, you have that solid covert perk here, you have reconcealment option with conceal, and you usually have an XCOM role to support that whole thing. And you can also pick up Shadow Step to, once you're out of concealment, to avoid any sort of overwatches and that kind of stuff. Alright, the Shredder. Again, like a really good damage dealer, good shredding, as you would expect from a class that's called the Shredder. It was just a question of, okay, is that enough in terms of damage output and utility for the squad? And I think that comes down to, I don't think I've played enough with that class to really get a good feel of what to expect. It really kind of puts you, since the Shredder, the corrosive slugshot here, it shreds 3 armor. Rupture, supplies burning, all that. Let's just say, okay, we gotta attack that shreds 3. That's like having the Shredder perk late game, right? Plasma weapon, you also shred 3. So that's cool. You can, in addition, of course, just like with somebody else's Shredder perk, also give them Shredder ammo, then it shreds 5. Problem is, of course, this uses 2 ammo. So even with an extended elite mag, you have 3 shots that you can do for shredding. If we just, in terms of shredding enemies, compare this to a gunner who has a weapon with more ammo capacity, and they have multi-shot attacks, right? Like rapid fire, like cyclic fire, where they can shred a lot of armor per turn on each enemy. They just don't have that. Sure, this is single action, not turn ending, but that means you didn't move, right? A gunner can move and rapid fire and still then apply 10 shred in an ideal situation with shredder ammo. So in addition to that, I think shotgun is kind of a weapon class that's suffering a little bit. In Beyond Legend, you have the very much doubled research time for any plasma weapon. And I think in most situations, it's going to be obviously you do plasma rifles first because you have to. And then you're probably doing the sniper rifles or the cannons, and then the other. and then you probably do an armor, and then maybe then you do the shotguns. And so any class that relies on bringing the shotguns to the table here is gonna get a little bit the short end of the stick. Which is a shame. Right. I think the Psionics were a little bit the surprise hidden saviors of the campaign in a way. With stronger enemies, which you have in the Beyond Legend environment, being able to mind control, mind spin, mind take over these kind of enemies, marionette control, insanity, mind control, mind spin, all of the above, it's just really good. You know, one of these buffed enemies that's really hard to kill, and suddenly they're on your team. So I was a little bit skeptical initially going into Psionics, but I think it really worked out, and all the missions where we brought Psionics had their own kind of flair. It was not enough to defeat the nonsense of the Psygate, but we got really close. In addition to, of course, you benefit a little bit from, for example, Mind Spin being a free action, because it's a free action for Sectoids, and it's the same perk. It's just, you know, don't want to say lazy class design, but it is copy-pasted over from the Sectoids in a way. So we're kind of getting a hidden buff here that we probably don't deserve. I'm still not sure with the XCOM rows on Psionics. They are so hit and miss, and more often miss than hit, that I wish there was something else in there. Like, all these kind of shooting related perks often feel like, yeah, that's not what we're looking for. And with I don't think we were ever offered face walk, but this was like the running gag of the campaign here on Omega, where I always said, okay, yeah, if we get face walk offered, then we can pick up all the shooty perks and maybe get into some more pistol skills and, you know, actually do some real damage. But nope, no offers there, so we just do psionic damage, which was good, you know. Inducer carbines with No Lands and Void Rift did a really good job. So I think definitely viable. Once again, the whole late game tactic of debuffing enemies and making your own squad hard to hit is just gonna get even amplified if you, in addition to being hard to hit, can mind control some enemies to act as mimic beacons. So shoot at those guys, they're even easier to hit. Same thing for Lenny, you know. I think he was even more control-y. We didn't have here the big damage abilities, but I think he had Mind Spin very early, and then of course Marionette control, and just being able to control a bunch of enemies. And I think we even used Caustic Lance once. Specialist. So I think my opinion here is going to be a little bit biased because of Puppeteer. Because Puppeteer made this feel insanely strong. Like being able to cast Haywire Protocol twice per turn, and, you know, basically control every single mechanical enemy that's out there, or, you know, in the worst case only shut them down, in the best case just take control of them for a couple turns. I think definitely single-handedly won us a couple of missions. I'm remembering one mission there on that abandoned city map where we had both Turbo Specialist and also our Roboticist controlling stuff, and at times we had like 5 or 6 enemy robots under our control, acting as additional targets. So that went really well. Of course, compared to a hijacker, specialists suffer a little bit. You know, we don't have concealment, don't have full override, which always means you gotta always watch the timer. Okay, how much longer is that hacked unit under my control? When do I need to actually take care of it? So that's always a little bit of a liability. But on the other hand, you have some additional gremlin perks that can be really useful. You know, medical airdrop, rescue protocol, aid protocol, and then all of that ultimately buffed by quick aid being effectively a free action, one of them per turn. That felt really good. Like I didn't. It's again. It combos nice if you have a different scout in the barracks available for the mission, like your Shinobi, your Hitman, maybe even your Recon. But then the conflict arises a little bit of, okay, who's going to be the officer here? Because you don't want to send 2 officers out. But I don't regret building a specialist that way, and of course you don't know beforehand if you get Puppeteer. I'm not sure how this would feel without Puppeteer, and just being a regular specialist who can, like, haywire protocol every, what is it, 4 turns? Oh, you're not telling me the cooldown? Well, let's see if I can. Alright, the Crasher. You know, this is a weird one to talk about, because normally, you know, normal campaigns you just get one of those, but you always get one of those because you get them on Gate Crasher. That's why they're called the Crasher. Incredibly effective. It sometimes feels ridiculous with, once you get Chimera, having these whole turns where you where is it? Ripjack, you combat advance in with Ripjack, then you get your free action Frantic Fire, you get your free action Lightning Hands, you get your free action Close Encounter shot, your free action Assault shot with a shotgun. All of this because you have Shadow Stab, while being immune to stupid enemy return fire shenanigans. All of this buffed by concentration, so you're not getting grazes. And hey, if you get a kill with this, and you will get kills with that, your cooldown is reduced. So that already feels very strong. And then we had this amazing XCOM row, like Reflex Untouchable, just such an insanely good combo, and Buckle Your Swash, also really good. Any melee attack with a pistol shot follow-up. So we usually engage with Combat Advance, which is a melee attack. Or sometimes we engage with Lightning Slash, which is a melee attack, you know, or just combine the two. This felt incredibly strong. On top of that, we had a wonderful Bond pairing with our agent. So either our agent was sitting in stealth, scouting to make sure we can all actually do this whole Crasher shenanigans without activating the rest of the map in the process, and potentially being able to then teamwork even more actions to the Crasher. But I want to say, like, I feel like even without this insane Reflex Untouchable combo, Crasher is just really, really, really strong. Unfortunately, since this whole thing, this whole combo, the whole ability set relies on dashing in and meshing enemies, it's something you just can't do on the late game story missions. I don't think you can do it on most supply rates, so that's where the Crasher then kind of falls off. But it's like if I had a tough guerrilla operation, you know, any sort of get in, hack the objective, get out mission with a short timer, and I can only bring 4 people, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring in our Crasher agent duo, and then we'll see who else gets to go along and watch them work their magic. Like, that was basically a little bit an I win card, but only for those missions. Great fun to play with. I like the Crasher rework. It's a fairly fairly recent, although at this point probably also 1 or 2 years ago, rework of the Crasher class as opposed to the original Crasher from Mod Jam. This rework is incredibly fun. You know, sure, the Chimera option feels really overpowered a little bit, but hey, it's all on a cooldown, you know. Just because that initial burst turn is really strong doesn't mean it's consistently overpowered. That all being said, I still also think there might be room. We tried building into the kind of Marauder Shredder Crasher to make up for the lack of Shredder classes. But you're also giving up that kind of stuff. It really kind of depends on what your squad needs. The Rafe Commando. Were you my starting class? I think you were my starting alien. So remember we were talking about shotgun users getting a little bit the short end of the stick, which is a weird thing to say, just as well as, you know, praising the Crasher that much. Anyway, the shotgun class is getting short end of the stick because the plasma tag takes so freaking long in Beyond Legend to research, and shotguns being probably your last weapon tag that you research. Well, imagine if your primary weapon doesn't even come from any of the plasma weapon tags, but instead it comes from the armor tag, which usually gets delayed even more because most of the time you don't have the money to build advanced armors anyway. Yeah, welcome to the plight of the Rafe Commando, probably also the Witch, definitely also the Templar, where they're strong in the early game, then they have a little bit of a drought as you research magnetic weapons, and then get ultimately the Predator armor. So they get their tier 2 gauntlets, and they're back into the swing of things for a little bit, and then their gauntlet weapon power falls off, and they're sitting there waiting for their tier 3, for their final tier gauntlets. And it's taken so long because the Warden armor is just a tech that's kinda not necessarily prioritized. Maybe there would have been an argument to prioritize a little bit more, since we had 3 classes that would have benefited from it. But once again, like, melee classes, just like many of the other close combat classes, are fantastic on like guerrilla operations and fall off on HQ assault, supply rates, UFOs, story missions. And that's unfortunately what the late game suddenly, you know, prioritizes. You want to be able to finish these kind of big missions, and having people that run in and activate 30 enemies in the process are not necessarily what you're looking for. That being said, in a world where I have unlimited AP, I would have really liked to see a mission with Recharge, Reaper, and Storm. Although I have to say, Reaper, holy shit, like -3 damage for each target you kill. Like, this is, you can't even talk about a Reaper chain anymore. Like, two links do not make a chain, and I don't see myself killing more than 2 people with a Reaper chain. Like, you might be better off just taking Liquidator and then I don't know, charging in and just killing enemies off with pistol, rather than with trying to kill them off with a Reaper chain. At least you don't get diminishing returns on your damage there. You always get your full pistol damage. It's, you know, one of those classes where I'm like, hey, you know what? Next time I get a Rafe Commando, maybe I want to try building them into a pistol spec. Would that be interesting? Probably. Alright. Oh my goodness, Fatal. that was crazy damage output that you do. Like, I'm so happy picking up explosive shot. That was so much damage. Of course, we got a little bit lucky here with the XCOM roll. No longer have an aim penalty. So I also think it says ignoring 30 dodge. I think it actually lowered enemy dodge by 30. And negative dodge translates then into crit chance, because I feel like he almost had 100% crit chance on most enemies, even though he has nothing that gives crit chance outside of 10 crit chance for full health targets. Like, nothing else gives crit chance, and he had close to 100% most of the time. So I feel like Hunter's Focus might be a little bit broken in that regard. Yeah, I don't think Pinpoint would have made up for what explosive shot did for us. This was fun to play with. Yeah, not much else to say. It, of course, you know, the one thing I mentioned before is that, you know, you want some utility on your snipers, which we don't have. There's no bullseye, there's no disabling shot. At least you have lead the target, so we've got that going for us, which is nice. And I guess, you know, explosive shot as an AoE attack is kind of utility. Well, not really. It's AoE, it's not utility, but it's a good opener. It's a damn good opener. Too bad it destroys corpses because it's an explosion, but we had some good explosive shots. And of course, the big thing is that this beast of a weapon here came with innate 3 points of shred just from the weapon. That's like having the shredder perk without having to pay for it. So, and then of course on explosive shot, applying that shred to every single target being hit made this a really strong character. There's not much else to say, mostly about playable aliens, playable advent, because you can't really pick which one you get. You know, you gotta see what RNG decides to throw your way for your campaign, and then make the best out of it. And I think the sniper spec here worked really nice. I'm happy I took squad side. Would have been really awkward with taking anatomy. And yeah, I'm happy I went for the explosive shot over pinpoint or chain shot. Okay, that was a Shiv. Combat engineer, yeah, we already mentioned that. I kinda wish breach was a little bit better. I think no, breach was actually kinda crap. You're better off just taking an advent shotgun that you get from the crates that has basically the same effect of doing the cover destruction. I don't think I ever successfully used breach because it has such a limited range. It's like a 10 tile range as opposed to the 17 tiles that you can shoot at normally. So you're probably better off just taking fastball so you can throw out even more smoke. Anyway. Yes, our Saboteur, Shooty Saboteur. Fun side story, in the current Twitch Beyond Legend campaign, we have 3 Saboteurs in the barracks, all of them grenade trappers, none of them shooters. Doesn't mean the shooting didn't quite work out. I think it actually worked reasonably well, especially once we got Mimetic Skin, although I think we didn't get too much value out of it. There was that one, what was it, a facility assault? We got some value out of it. Now, the biggest thing that always caught me off guard, even though I played a lot with this class, is that, you know, the constant need to remind myself they don't have squad sight. So it's kind of a sniper class that doesn't have squad sights. And that makes it really tricky to use at stages. I think even without having mimetic skin, it would be even harder to use. Then you're just scouting around, and then you have your one big turn where you can, you know, trigger quick feed a bunch of times with the help of fate, and then it's it. You don't have a way to regain concealment. So it's kind of really on missions a one-trick pony, which makes it good for guerrilla operations, but kind of makes it really kind of almost useful. No, not useful, useless on longer missions. And mimetic skin kind of gives you then that utility that you need to become useful on those missions. Because other than that, skill set wise, between bullseye and disabling shot and a free battle scanner, you have some really good utility for a sniper. But yeah, I kind of wish they had some natural way to get back in concealment so they can actually use this more often. Or at least, let's say if they had Dervish, technically you can regain concealment by just using Fate, but 4-turn cooldown is just way too long. So if they had something like Dervish to reduce cooldowns, so they could use Fate at least a little bit more often, would make it more viable. But yeah, I'm not sure if they can get like a squad side perk from the XCOM row. There's also, of course, that Requiem vector rifle where they could gain additional concealment, but am I actually using that here? No. The problem with that is kind of just that it's a single shot weapon, so that, if the whole idea is to break concealment, you get quick feed, and then you press fade, and you break concealment again, get quick feed, and you shoot 3 times per turn, then you don't want a weapon that only has a single shot. That defeats the purpose. Anyway, the Stormtrooper. Well, say it with me. It's a great class until you come to network repairs, and then the whole I'm running in there, flanking an enemy from point blank range, and shooting them, and then I shoot them again to kill them, and never mind, they shot back at me, and now I'm in sickbay. Which is the plight of the Stormtrooper, and to a certain extent the Skirmisher. Which otherwise would be a really strong class. You know what else makes this class really strong? The Haldum Siege Bullpup. If you can get, of course, a Hinter Relic and build one of these, and then you get the Judgment, the Banish kind of ability, this suddenly makes any class that can use this weapon a viable alternative for any late game missions, even though normally I would say like close range class, they're not that great on supply rates or the late game missions. In the Twitch campaigns, they became actually a force to reckon with, and I think on 2 out of 3 of the chosen kills we did in that other campaign, I had somebody with the Siege Bullpup there to banish, execute the chosen in the strongholds. Unfortunately, getting a Hinter Corps is kinda tricky, and you won't always get one per campaign. So that's not really super reliable. And yeah, of course, then the whole plight with network repairs. Now they do get moving targets, they have additional defense and dodge against reaction fire, but if you're next to the enemy, right, because you wanna be, or you're flanking them, so a typical situation for Stormtroopers, skirmishers to a certain extent, right, is the whole I'm just gonna run out into the open where I flank the enemy, hit them with hit and run, hit them again, get the kill, and then move back to safety with Implacable. But if enemies get the free reaction shots against you, that whole thing falls apart very, very quickly, and suddenly you're not bringing them into missions anymore, because it's just a liability. That being said, you know, ideally, you're not gonna run into network repairs again. God, I wish I hadn't picked that pick your poison. Anyway, Grenadier. He throws grenades go boom, enemies go, yeah. Not much to say. It's grenades, it's great. It's fun. It falls a little bit off in the late game, you know, for the typical reasons of, well, you run out of grenades on the really long missions, even with improvised frag grenades. I think that was a bit of a problem. We have way more enemies that are immune or resistant to explosives. And maybe also a little bit of the factor of not being used in the late game is not so much that you get weaker, but other AoE options get just better. Mostly rockets, Shredstorm rockets, applying like not just damage to all enemies they hit, but also then debuffing them further. Or you have stuff like, well, the Requiem sniper rifle, applying a whole bunch of AoE without having any ammo limitations and from anywhere on the map, on any target on the map, pretty much, because it's from squad side range. That being said, I still think Grenadiers are good, they're strong, they're really, really shining in the early game, and they're one of your fast levelers. So I'd pick them up still. It also then depends a little bit on getting the right corpses and the right tech for the good grenades, right? Getting an early laser grenade is especially strong. You want to be able to get 1, maybe 2 free vortex grenades later on in the game. If you can get radiation grenades, you're also going to be good, but that's all a little bit of a corpse gamble. Barely played with the Viper Marauder, so I'm just gonna skip here. Not much to say about it. Barely remember that. Well, technically this should be great, right? Because hey, it's another combat drug smoker, and you know, the whole thing of smoking up the enemy or smoking up your squad to become unhittable is really good, right? It works so well on the combat engineer. Yeah, kinda didn't really work all that well here, and I can't really pinpoint what the main issues are. I think one problem is, of course, you try to trying to do 2 things at the same time, right? You want to have sting grenades, so you want to have flashbangs to debuff the enemies, but you also want to have smoke grenades to buff your own team. So it becomes a matter of having enough charges to do both at the same time. I don't know. I'm not sure if this was just a matter of he came too late to the party and didn't get to go on enough missions to level up, or it was really a matter of this just not working out as opposed to a combat engineer. I want to say it was a too late to the party. It was one of the later promotions, and that's why it didn't work. And I'm gonna leave it at that. Barely saw any missions, so no comment on Fresh Blood here. I mean, although this is a case of I think you get that mutant relatively early, and it was just not good enough, and that's why they didn't get to go on many missions. I think the mutant trooper relies on getting a good XCOM row to become viable, because their main skill tree is kinda all over the place, and that just doesn't feel doesn't feel good. If you don't get in a good XCOM row, this is not enough to really like it. You know, you get all those grenade perks, but you'd rather have proper Grenadier than a mutant. You have these kind of shooty suppression perks, but hey, I'd rather bring a gunner than a mutant.
And then you have some bayonet melee perks, but hey, any other melee user is gonna be better than the mutant of those. It's like jack of all trades, bad at all of them. Let me just grab a quick drink here. This is getting really long. So the Keeper class. There's a few things to say about the Keeper class. First of all, it's kind of uniquely locked between behind that first retaliation mission, the first full retaliation mission. Now, in some cases, some people run a strategy where they try to avoid that first retaliation, by putting a haven back on hiding. Don't. Once you reach certain advanced strength, all that kind of stuff. I feel like the Keeper class is strong enough to justify almost trying to get an early retaliation as early as possible, so you get them in your barracks sooner. And I think they have two incredibly strong builds, one being the sniper build we see here, and one, of course, being the officer build, bottom row, which makes it really hard to decide each time around what to build for. I think, though, in the Beyond Legend setting, the sniper build might be stronger. Because I think they are probably the strongest class to utilize the Requiem sniper rifle. Which, of course, we already mentioned that before. It's an incredibly strong weapon when you get it. It falls off later on. But the Keeper has a few things to make it still be relevant, even late game. One being stationary threat. Since it increases the damage, and thereby, if you have an AoE weapon, increases the AoE damage, if you can afford to keep them stationary for 3-4 turns, you're gonna have that damage boost. The other one being Apex Predator, you have naturally a high crit chance, thanks to hunker down aim, steady hands, sniper's nest, right? That's 40 crit right here already. Plus the weapon crit chance, plus flanked enemies that you're very likely hitting with the AoE attack. You're probably gonna have 100% crit on many of these enemies there that you're attacking. And as compared to Fearsome, Apex Predator has a much higher chance of panicking enemies. So you basically AoE attacking a bunch of enemies, and everything that survives has a good chance to be panicked, if it can panic. Now, alternatively, you can of course, say, forget about that sniper rifle, I want to have a proper sniper, and you still end up with bullseye and disabling shot for good sniper utility. Although, what I really liked about this spec is being able to pick up by my command, and then doing combat presence shenanigans without giving up anything in those turns. So I think that worked really well. Of course, late game with the debuff meta currently being the thing, you need a second sniper in your group that then has bullseye if you want to debuff some enemies. But I think this sniper build is incredibly strong. The officer build is good. We're running in the current Twitch campaign a Keeper officer that's really dishing out the commands, the paramedics, supply packs, all that stuff. And even making use for Call for Fire. As much as I dislike that ability, it actually can become quite useful. The main problem, of course, on a officer like this is they're not bringing scouting because they don't have concealment, and they're not bringing hacking because they don't have a gremlin. But they bring in really strong officer skills. In addition to that, they also learn the officer skills twice as fast with quick study. So, yeah, I really like the Keeper. I think it's in some other campaign, non-Beyond Legend, I even tried that top row Overwatch keeper, which was okay, but you're missing out. You're missing out by not doing something like this, especially like by my command. It's such a really strong ability, even if you're not an officer, right? Just because it works for combat presence, and combat presence effectively becomes a free action. That is good enough to make this a good pickup. This was an interesting one in this campaign, because I think from the very moment we saw Xen's stats, we said, oh, this is garbage. We're gonna turn him into a mech later. And we never did. And, well, I guess part of the reason was we were incredibly low on cash the whole campaign, so we couldn't afford to, but he was also still doing a really, really good job. Again, the Hinter Relic Bullpup might have helped with that. Probably was the biggest factor. We did do some pistol skill shenanigans, did we not? Yes, we did. And that all being said, what I said about the Stormtrooper earlier applies to the Skirmisher here too. Network repairs kinda sent us to sickbay every other mission, and that's not really sustainable. But in a world without network repairs, which I mean, I hope nobody's actually doing the drinking game and taking a shot each time I mention network repairs, because if that's the case, then yeah, I hope you called an ambulance ahead of time. This is not healthy. Alright, moving on. Specialist we already talked about. Assault didn't get high enough rank. Shinobi, yes, this was our scouty Shinobi. I think we might be... Are we through? Are we missing anybody? Psyops, backup crasher, Templar. Oh boy, yes, we tried to build a tank Templar. This is what happens. They don't even reach gunnery sergeant. I think if you want to play a Templar in Beyond Legend, you kind of have to start with Templar HQ and have a Templar as your starting soldier, because what I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Rafe commando applies even more so to the Templar. Like, they really, really depend on their gauntlet, and if you're behind on gauntlet tech, they become functionally useless, and you can't really afford to bring them on missions. Like, the Templar damage is already low, you have the liability of having a melee class, you don't have Shadow Step, so you can't avoid enemy overwatches and retaliation attacks in close range. Or network repairs. So you need to bring in good damage, and that then depends really solely on your gauntlets. Well, I guess you can say, hey, I didn't need to bring damage if I'm tanking, but even your tanking depends on your gauntlets, because the gauntlets determine how much shield you get when you parry up, right? And that then, if you get to Gunnery Sergeant and pick up hardened shields, which is a fantastic skill to have, but you need to have shields, you know? If you don't have shields, you don't have hardened shields, and your shield value, your ablative value, is determined by your gauntlet technology. Akana, if I were to play another Beyond Legend campaign, I would probably want to try out a Templar start just to get them higher leveled quicker and see if they can keep up in that case. Like, I think being the third hero class we got, and then reliant on gauntlet tech, which was a bit of an afterthought always, right? A lower priority than any other tech, really hurt them. Like, having your hero class not even reach Master Sergeant feels like something went terribly, terribly wrong. Spark. What is there to say? First of all, well, few class having more flush in general might be a really good thing. So the spark bringing flush to the table and baseline shredding makes them really strong. I always wonder if I'm so strapped for cash that I only ever build one spark per campaign, or if I just am too dumb or too kind of Highlander focused that I simply forget about the option to just get a second or maybe even a third one. Now, there are some enemies in Beyond Legend that do increase damage to robotics. It is a little bit of a rough sale. I don't know. I think there's some arguments. You can make a good case for getting a second spark, especially if you have, like, again, teaming them up with a roboticist really amplifies their abilities even more. And then kind of depends on if you have more than one roboticist and if they have good perks. Definitely some stuff you can do there. There's, of course, I'm not sure if that's a Beyond Legend thing or a general thing, that the EM Pulse secondary heavy weapon has been nerfed to only have 2 users per missions as opposed to unlimited users that it had before. And one thing I'm really torn about is the whole decision on, the coring cannon versus the default plasma mech cannon. I was a big coring cannon fan, but then once the realization set in, hey, this doesn't take your ammo into account, and it doesn't shred properly based on your shredder perk, I've kind of gone back to just going for the regular plasma mech cannon. But I'm not sure if that's the final answer, or if there's a better way to handle it. I think there are other Requiem type weapons for the mech that I haven't tested out yet. They're also a little bit harder to get, everything being very much corpse dependent. This is the kind of approach I usually go with. I think there's some people that are doing some more tanky stuff with impact compensation. Isn't there, like, I'm thinking about sacrifice? Is that not a thing anymore? I don't even know. Maybe an XCOM row thing? I think there's some people that prefer, like, disabling shot traverse fire over the bombard stuff, but for me, I just like bombard so much, and being able to... It's the cover destruction, right? The damage of bombard is forgettable, but having reliable cover destruction, pinpoint cover destruction, is really good. And what I often use it for is to, in chosen encounters, to destroy the cover of the chosen without hitting the chosen. So the chosen is exposed and doesn't take their reaction to run to the next cover, but rather they're exposed, and you can then set up a cyclic fire, banish, judgment, whatever attack to do some really good damage. Alright, Raspberry Fire didn't see much action. Sharpshooter. Okay, there's still some Master Sergeants to come. So we built ET here, especially with the Recon sniper rifle in mind. Basically, I saw steady hands in the XCOM, and I said, okay, let's go. Full-on sniper rifle build. That was this is an insane amount of damage, right? PS2 armor and then plus 6 damage on each attack. This is what I said about Denmava or Keeper and Stationary Threat boosting the AoE damage. Well, how about you have, instead of 3 damage after 3 turns, you just have 6 damage every turn. So that is really good. Unfortunately, then the nerf to the sniper rifle to no longer trigger death from above really hurt the whole ammo economy of this build. basically being reliant on autoloaders, and if you're out of autoloaders, you're kind of screwed over. And yeah, and I'm still torn. I don't know what the final answer is on using Rec Room Sniper Rifle versus Rusum Basic Sniper Rifle. So you have access to kind of the utility shots. One sec. So the disarming shot being a relatively decent shot against like the sectopods with their return fire ability, or also against some Rec Room enemies. I wish this, you know, the text says it disables the target's weapon. We know it actually just unloads the ammo from the enemy's weapon, so once they reload they can take an action again, but also all the enemies that don't actually use ammo are completely kind of unaffected by that. And I think this was something that was more transparent, because you can never know, even if you F1 an enemy, is their weapon using ammo or is it not? Are they gonna just use a secondary weapon for a reaction attack? So this is kind of a weird thing. Interestingly, in the Twitch campaign, we have a sharpshooter who had bullseye in the XCOM row. And while we started using the Rec Room Sniper Rifle the whole time, then late game we switched back to the regular sniper rifle for the bullseye utility. And bullseye with lethal and AMF hurts a lot. Alright, oh, the Viper Commando. Man, I wish you had been in the barracks earlier. Like, this is such a fun class to play. I think it still suffers a little bit from pistol aim being absolute dog water. And it always felt like a gamble, and sometimes it paid off, and she hit all the pistol shots and did a lot of damage and triggered social dynamo and crits left, right, and center, mighty criticals. And sometimes it was just miss, and okay, I guess I take a rifle shot to at least get some damage in. That all being said, I don't think I played enough of that class. I hope I get her again in a future campaign, maybe in a non-Beyond Legend setting even, to test out the other perks. Because I think there's a lot of fun builds to have with this character. Good thing, 10 out of 10. Is this a Beyond Legend late game? So I'm looking at this. Is this a character I would bring to a Chosen Stronghold or to the Cygate in a Beyond Legend campaign? And yeah, probably not, but hey, it's another one of those classes that is really good on guerrilla operations. Alright. Yeah, this was our attempt to build a, well, cannon crasher once we have Chimera, but didn't quite get there. Back to the drawing board. I kind of want to try that again eventually. Grenades, okay. Oh yes, the Fusilier. What to say about the Fusilier? The whole Fusel points tracking shot mechanic is a little bit convoluted. And by a little bit convoluted, I mean it's very convoluted. It's also kind of weird how that interacts with the Rec Room Sniper Rifle, but, you know, leaving that aside, you do have a sniper that comes with baseline Shredder, which is kind of good, and can, of course, if you manage to get the Fusel points, that stacks up another, because each point is also +1 damage on all your ranged attacks. That can work really nice with the Rec Room Sniper Rifle. That can also really work well with a regular sniper rifle, I think. A lot of it will depend on what the XCOM row is. A lot of this also depends now. Now I've been using these, so these are Reshi's Requiem classes, right? The Fusilier, the
The Witch, I think, is also one of those, and there's a couple others, and they were not really originally designed with long war in mind, and there is a mod from episode 0 which kind of brings them better, integrates them better into Long War of the Chosen. So with that mod, there might be some more fitting XCOM row perks. They also, they're all missing the pistol row, so that has been added, and I think some minor adjustments here. And I kind of want to test out the modded class at some point, so I'm not really sure what to say about this. And I'm also not sure how we never made it. I guess did we get her late? I'm not sure why we never made it to Master Sergeant. Between fizzle points, +6 damage, Sniper's Mantra, another +2. This could have been the highest damage dealing Requiem sniper we ever had. But I guess you kind of got late to the party again. Anyway, oh yeah, the hijacker. Another, late to the party edition. So in the current Twitch campaigns, the hijackers, I've got 2 hijackers, max rank officers, all the way on top of the barracks, and they're kind of a staple. Perfect plane, fail safe, being able to hack a bunch of stuff without any regards on whether or not you succeed the hack. Full override, the chance to take over any sort of enemy. Again, no risk to try it if you have failed safe. It's really good. Like, they have scouting, they start with Phantom. They have an SMG, so they have kind of reduced detection range. They lack any other detection range reduction. But generally, if you run them with an SMG and then like the Mirage armor or the Pathfinder Hunter armor, it's usually okay. The advantage of them being a scout is they can kind of stay in, or rather, they being a hacker, they can kind of stay in the back. Like, the Recon needs to be a little bit more up in it, or Shinobi, they need to be more up ahead. A hijacker can kind of stay back and use like scouting protocol, or if they have it, even scanning protocol, and then thereby they can still do their scouting job without risking getting spotted. And I think in terms of officer, hijackers have just an incredibly skilled set, right? Here, between resupply, rescue, airdrop, stealth protocol later on, and then by my command for double commands. It's just a really solid officer hacker skill set, and yeah, one of the stronger hacking classes. I still think, there's a good case for both roboticist and specialist to exist in combination with the hijacker, but the hijacker might just be a little bit better than the others. I don't know, hard to say. I think they have a bunch of people that didn't saw action, and then we're back to Contra, which tells me we've gone through all the soldiers in the roster. I guess, honorable mention, and it breaks my heart, Mikey. Oh no, not Mikey. Well, Mikey also breaks my heart. Sorry to see you go. Oh, that was the Chosen Avenger defense. Yeah. The Juggernaut Rocketeer, which actually worked reasonably well, but I think what I was really thinking about was the Tesla Trooper. If you get them early and you can kind of carry them through, once they reach Tech Sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant, they suddenly become really strong, and if you can get mimetic skin on them, they're insanely good. Fortunately, he was taken from us before we got to either of those. I mean, look at that. He has 268 out of 245. Even in the mission where he died, he made like 30 XP. Crazy. Alright. I'm looking at the timer. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. So I don't think I'm gonna load up the Twitch campaign save and go through the other classes there. So we'll probably do a little bit of a class review in the stream. For now, I think that's all I'm gonna say about the classes here. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.